Guns N' Roses and Nirvana were without a doubt some of the biggest bands in the early 90s. Both groups released their second LPs 1 week apart in late 1991 on the same label, Geffen Records. Guns N' Roses dropped their highly anticipated double album Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 on September 17th, while Nirvana's Nevermind came out the following week. Guns N' Roses albums would take the number 1 and 2 spots on the Billboard charts, while Nirvana, who was still fairly unknown at the time, wouldn't top the Billboard album charts until January of 1992 when they displaced Michael Jackson. One person who counted himself an early fan of Nirvana was Guns N' Roses frontman Axl Rose. In fact, he stressed in interviews that he was excited about alternative rock and didn't see it as a threat to his band. During the making of the band's video for Don't Cry in 1991, Axl can be seen wearing a Nirvana hat and a Red Hot Chili Peppers shirt. In the actual music video, you can see a Nirvana hat and Axl wearing a Jane's Addiction shirt. In fact, when guitarist Izzy Stradlin quit the band, Jane's Addiction guitarist Dave Navarro was offered the chance to fill in for him, but he was so deep in the throes of addiction that he never showed up for rehearsals. There were even some paparazzi photos of Axl wearing a Nirvana hat in Ireland in the spring of 1992 when the band played Slane Castle. Rose would be interviewed by Metallica in late 1991 and was asked which bands he'd like to see cover Guns N' Roses, and he responded saying the following: "I'd like to hear Nirvana do Welcome to the Jungle. That's what I'd like to hear. I'd like to hear Nirvana do Jungle their way," he'd say. It initially seemed like Axl and Nirvana frontman Kurt Cobain had a lot in common. Both came from small towns, they grew up in broken homes, and turned to rock music to get through life. But Cobain couldn't stand Guns N' Roses. Even ahead of Nevermind's release, Cobain gave numerous interviews slamming the band, telling Big O in February of 1991, "I think Guns N' Roses are promoting the wrong values, like sexism, and the way they do drugs. I mean, what are they rebelling against? I don't think this is rebellion. Rebellion is standing up to people like Guns N' Roses," he'd say. 1 month after Nevermind came out, Nirvana would be performing at the Palace Theater in Los Angeles, and in attendance that night was Geffen president Eddie Rosenblatt and Axl Rose. Nirvana manager Danny Goldberg would recall in his book, "Backstage afterwards, Eddie Rosenblatt told me that he had come with Axl Rose and asked if he could bring him into the dressing room to say hi to Kurt. When I conveyed this request, Kurt grimaced and said he really didn't want to meet the Guns N' Roses singer. I didn't want to put Geffen's president in an untenable situation, so I suggested to Kurt that he and I leave the dressing room, and then I'd give Rosenblatt a couple of passes. That way it wouldn't be like we were excluding them, just that Kurt couldn't be found." Prior to the feud erupting, Axl could see how alternative rock was changing things in the music landscape, as he told an audience during a concert in Phoenix, Arizona in February of 1992.
You ever been let down by, I don't know, family, friends, something you wanted, or maybe just life in general? You know the mood I'm talking about when something you like, maybe your friends are over and something you like comes on TV. Something you like, but you don't care because you're just not in the mood. It doesn't matter. You've been let down. I mean, it's kind of like this band Nirvana, why this Teenage Spirit, why this song's such a success. People relate to being let down.
It was during the same month that Rose allegedly asked Nirvana to perform at his birthday party, something that the band turned down, according to their manager Danny Goldberg. Things would only escalate from there. As Nirvana became more popular, they also did a lot more press. Promoting Nevermind in 1991, Kurt made some more disparaging remarks against Guns N' Roses, telling Seconds, "We're not your typical Guns N' Roses type of band that has absolutely nothing to say." By the summer of 1992, it was announced that Guns N' Roses would be doing a co-headlining tour with Metallica across North America. Axl wanted Nirvana to open the tour, something that their drummer Dave Grohl would recall years later, saying, and I quote, "Axl had been calling Kurt nonstop. One day we're walking through an airport and Kurt says, 'F, Axl Rose won't stop calling me.'" In a recent interview with Metallica guitarist Kirk Hammett, he would recall trying to get Nirvana to come on the tour, telling Revolver magazine, "I remember having to call Kurt up because we wanted Nirvana to open up the Guns N' Roses Metallica tour. This came down to me from my manager saying, okay, we've talked to Nirvana's management, they've told us no. Kurt doesn't want to do it because he doesn't want to be affiliated with Guns N' Roses. He doesn't approve of Axl's behavior. A long laundry list of stuff, and it's all about Guns N' Roses and Axl. It has nothing to do with Metallica. They love Metallica," he'd recall. Looking back, Nirvana probably was happy they turned down the tour, as Axl would frequently show up late to gigs, he'd walk off stage, cancel gigs due to his throat problems, and of course there was the riot in Montreal. By late 1992, Cobain gave an interview to The Advocate, an LGBTQ publication, where he blasted Rose, saying he was, and I quote, an effing sexist, a racist, and a homophobe, and you can't be on his side and be on our side. I'm sorry that I have to divide this up like this, but it's something you can't ignore, and besides, they can't write good music. By the late summer of 1992, Courtney Love and Kurt Cobain gave the infamous interview to Vanity Fair, which documented Love's drug use during her pregnancy. It resulted in the couple almost losing custody of their child, something that Rose would pounce on during a concert in Orlando, Florida on September 2nd, 1992, as he said here.
We've had our share of problems with so-called alternative bands. What is this word? I mean, I didn't find myself using it. Alternative, like someone who leads an alternative lifestyle. All I know is that when Guns N' Roses started, ain't no radio stations wanted to play our shit either. Ain't no radio stations wanted to play Metallica. So I think we have the world's biggest alternative crowd here tonight. I think that the problem starts when you start thinking that you're different from everybody else on the planet. You may be a little different in what you're doing or how you're going about doing it, but I got a good feeling that you're probably a human. Right? You're probably a human being. And so right now, alternative, only thing that means to me is someone like Kurt Cobain in Nirvana, who basically is with a junkie wife. And if the baby's born deformed, I think they both ought to go to prison. That's my feeling. And he's too good and too cool to bring his rock and roll to you. Because the majority of you, he doesn't like or want to play to or even have you like his music. It seems to be a general feeling among a lot of alternative bands that they don't want the majority of people even liking them. They like it on the outside.
Everything would come to a head a week later on September 9th at the MTV Video Music Awards in Los Angeles. It was an event that would see both Nirvana and Guns N' Roses perform. That night, Guns N' Roses were set to perform November Rain with Axl's childhood hero Elton John. Ahead of the band's performance, Kurt would admit, as reported by Loudersound, "I spat on Axl's keyboard. It was either that or beat him up. We're down on this platform that brought us up hydraulically. I saw his piano there, and I just had to take this opportunity and spit big goobers all over his keyboard." And it turned out that Kurt would end up spitting all over Elton John's piano and was horrified when he learned that. Backstage, things escalated pretty quickly as Axl would spot Kurt, with the Nirvana frontman recalling,
"You know, yesterday, my wife and I were sitting in a tent at the MTV Music Awards, and we're having lunch, and Axl Rose walked by us, and we yelled at Axl. We said, 'Axl, will you be the godfather of our child?' And he said," he stopped, he turned around, he pointed his finger at my wife.
With his bodyguard.
Yeah, well, he had like 20 bodyguards with him, and he's doing the Madonna documentary. He's got his little film camera with him.
And you had a 3-week-old baby in your arms.
And I had a little helpless child in my arms. And so he said to my wife, "You better shut up, bitch. Don't pitch me any shit tonight." Because tonight was obviously the highlight of his career. And then he looked at me and he said, "You better keep your wife shut, or I'm gonna take you to the pavement." I was shaking and I went, "What? What? What are you gonna do? You're gonna beat me up?" And he said, "You better keep your wife's mouth shut. You embarrass everybody. You embarrass your wife, you embarrass your old man, you embarrass me." And then I was shaking and I said, "I told my wife to shut up, bitch."
The same night, Nirvana would perform their single Lithium, and towards the end of the performance, drummer Dave Grohl would poke fun at Axl, as you can see here. Backstage, other members of Guns N' Roses and Nirvana got involved in the feud, as bassist Duff McKagan confronted Chris Novoselic, but before anything got physical, security got involved. McKagan and guitarist Gilby Clarke would shake one of Nirvana's trailers, where Kurt's baby Frances Bean was in. Amy Finnerty, who worked at MTV at the time and who discovered Nirvana for the network, threatened to call security, and the Guns N' Roses members ran away. Slash, for his part, claimed he didn't have any animosity towards Nirvana and wasn't involved in the altercation backstage, saying, and I quote, "I don't have time for this shit." McKagan would look back at this moment in his life, recalling, "Kim Fastback Warnick, my mentor, called me the day after my embarrassment and scolded me for it. I felt so low. We had so many things in common. We have so many things in common today," he'd say. The following day, Nirvana talked to the media, giving their version of events, but Guns N' Roses did the talking from the stage. At a September 13th show 4 days after the VMAs in Toronto, Canada, Axl once again blasted Nirvana on stage and burnt that cap of his that you saw in the Don't Cry video and the paparazzi photos I showed earlier.
I get this on film tonight. This is a band of a bunch of who think they're the only little fucking world that they can rock around the world. Let's see if we can fix this stuff. Come on, it's not working, guys.
Urbana.
It's not firing.
It's NWA. It's NWA.
By the end of 1992, things seemed to simmer down in the press, with a few interviews mentioning the feud. Guns N' Roses drummer Matt Sorum would tell Raw magazine in 1993, "That little punk," referring to Cobain, "We did nothing but treat those guys effing good. We asked them to tour with us, we talked good stuff about them in the press, Axl even wore their effing hat. But they basically slag us off everywhere they go, including the MTV Awards. We had a little row backstage, and Duff almost kicked the bass player's ass, and I was ready to help him. I mean, they have some good songs, though they're not a great band, but it's as if they don't want the fame. I don't understand, man," he'd say. Days before the Nirvana frontman was found dead in his home, Cobain was on a flight from LA to Seattle, and sitting next to him was Duff McKagan. Rolling Stone would publish that the musicians discussed rehab and addiction, and they discussed mutual friends they shared, with Duff recalling, "We were talking about what it feels like to be going back home. That's what he said he was doing, going home. Once they got to Seattle, the pair went to baggage claim, and McKagan noticed Cobain was feeling down and thought about offering the frontman to stay at his house, but he quickly disappeared before he could talk to him." On April 5th, 1994, Cobain would be found dead in his Seattle home. Years later, while promoting Foo Fighters on Jon Stewart's Daily Show, Grohl would reveal how Matt Sorum was one of the first people to express his condolences, telling the late night host, "After Kurt died, one of the first phone calls I got was from Matt Sorum. He left a message and said, 'Man, I'm really sorry, and I hope you're doing well.' I thought that was really cool," he'd say. In the book Everybody Loves Our Town, Bryn Breidenthal, who worked in PR for Geffen Records, recalled breaking the news of Kurt's death to Axl Rose, revealing, "The first thing I did when I got back to my hotel room was to call Axl because I was afraid of how the news might impact him. It was such an emotional roller coaster. I was afraid that Axl would hurt himself. He felt things really deep and felt a real connection there, even though there was no connection from the other side. I think he had a lot of empathy for Kurt. I was on the phone with Axl until about 3 o'clock in the morning," she'd remember. Fast forward now to 2010, and Duff McKagan was working as a guest columnist for his hometown paper, the Seattle Weekly. He would write a column apologizing to Chris Novoselic for his behavior at the 1992 VMAs, writing, "I blew my lid when I perceived a slander toward my band from the Nirvana camp. My drunken haze and my drug-induced mania, I heard what I wanted to hear, and I went after Chris Novoselic backstage. I had no control of myself then, and Chris, I'm sorry for that day." The same year, Dave Grohl, Slash, and Duff would join Lemmy at the Revolver Golden God Awards and perform the classic Motorhead tune Ace of Spades. The same year, Grohl would guest star in Slash's solo album along with McKagan on the instrumental track Watch This. Fast forward to 2016, and Guns N' Roses' reunion of Slash, Duff, and Axl was about to kick off. During the band's first gig at the Troubadour, Axl would break his foot, jeopardizing the rest of their planned stadium tour. Rather than rescheduling dates, Grohl lent the band a throne that he himself had used the previous year after he fell off stage and broke his leg in Sweden. Since then, Axl, Slash, and Duff have joined Foo Fighters on stage in Italy, performing the song It's So Easy. While Grohl has appeared on stage with Guns N' Roses several times performing their set closer Paradise City, Axl would end up thanking Grohl for his kind gesture by buying him a guitar, as Grohl would reveal to Classic Rock magazine, saying he had Slash go pick me up a guitar, and he picked me up an early 60s Gibson ES335 Dot, which to this day is the nicest effing guitar I've ever played in my life. It was an incredibly kind and classy gesture, and I was very appreciative, he'd say. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like button and subscribe. See you again in Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.